reciting the descendants of Dhruva. Basically responding to the questions asked by Vidur about the incident of Narad Muni reciting the glories of Dhruva Maharaj in the yajna of the Prachetas. So Vidur, being inquisitive, asked him, who are these Prachetas? And why did Narad Muni recite the glories there? So in order to explain who the Prachetas are, Maitreya starts describing the descendants of Dhruva. And as he is going down the lineage, he talks about King Vena. So initially he talks about it in a summary way. That there was this King Vena, he was cursed by the Brahmins and he died, the son of Anga. So Vidur stops him, wait a minute. How is it that in the lineage of Dhruva, a personality appeared who was so fallen that he not only disrespected the Brahmins, but he offended them to such an extent that they were forced to curse him. Because Vidur knows that the Brahma sharp is used very, very rarely. Even though in the scriptures we see that this person cursed this person, but in the greater scheme of things, the Brahmins, they very rarely curse. For one, it's not in their nature. The nature of the Brahman is forbearance and tolerance. And the second is that it contaminates their purity. Because cursing is generally in a mode of ignorance. It's a symptom of anger. It's a symptom of wanting to take revenge. So these are all the qualities that the Brahmins work very hard to eradicate from themselves. Now again, notwithstanding that, we do see Vishwamitra cursing so many times. We see Durvasha Muni cursing so many times. But again, these are extraordinarily great personalities. And in some cases, the curses are to facilitate the pastime of the Lord. And in some cases, they're blemishes. Even great personalities have blemishes. So in some cases, they are blemishes. So that's why Vidur is surprised that why did the Brahmins curse the king who's supposed to be the protector of the kingdom? So we are continuing with the inquiries by Vidura. Kim vamu vena utsijya brahmadandam ayuyujan dandavradhare rajni munaya dharma kovidaha. Vidur also inquired, how is it that the great sages who were completely conversant with religious principles desired to curse King Vena, who himself carried the rod of punishment, and thus awarded him the greatest punishment, Brahmashap? So Vidur is surprised from both perspectives that the curse was cast by the Brahmins and it was cast on the king, who himself carries the rod of punishment, which means that the king himself is righteous, Rajrishi. So it does not seem to be something that is normal for the sages to curse a king. Srila Prabhupada explains the Vedic system of checks and balances. That the king is supposed to provide law and order in the state. And if the king is not properly situated, the Brahmanas take the responsibility of correcting or replacing the king. So when the king is properly situated, the Brahmanas take the responsibility of guiding him. They give him appropriate advice. And if not possibly properly situated, then they rectify the situations. So Prabhupada says that the king is able to give punishment to everyone. But in this case, it appears that the great sages punished him. Later he said the Brahmanas were so powerful that simply by the cursing, one would immediately die. So even though the king carried what is known as the rod of punishment, like Dandavratadhare. But the Dandavrata that he is carrying is no match to the Brahmashap. So indicating the relative prowess of the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins. Verse 23. Navedya prajapala prajabhira gavanapi yadasau lokapalana vivartyaja swatejasa. It is the duty of all citizens in a state never to insult the king, even though he sometimes appears to have done something very sinful. Because of his prowess, the king is always more influential than all other ruling chiefs. So the king is actually a representative of the Supreme Lord. In fact, actually it is said that even the prominent demigods, they reside in the body of the king. And the king is also addressed as Nar Narayan. So Narayan is of course Lord and Nar is human. So in this context, it indicates that the Nar who carries Narayan, or the Nar who represents Narayan. So we see this in the case of Indra, that once in a while, Indra does something that is not very good. And we still see the Devas supporting him. He might steal the horse in the Ashwamedh Yagya. He might try to trouble a sage performing austerities, or he may become infatuated with the wife of some other man. Now, by the way, this is many Indras doing many things at different points of time. So it's not that one Indra is doing all those things, because we know the Indra is a post. It's kind of like saying that the president of the US had a relationship with an intern. The president of the US was taking bribes. The president of the US was illegally wiretapping phones of others. So all the statement is true, but these are different presidents at different points of time that were doing it. Not that one person was doing all of them. So many of these things are, even though we say that Indra had illicit relationship with Ahilya, and Indra stole the horse from the Yagya of Prithu Maharaj, or Indra tried to bewilder Narayan Rishi. But these are spread over many, many millennia. Different personalities who did it. But regardless of that, because of the position of Indra as the king, he is even Lord Vishnu, he casts a benevolent eye. Same thing is for the king, that because of his position, he is excused of doing something that is sinful. So Prabhupada said it means that what King Vena did was something that was beyond the realms of acceptable sinful activities, which is why he was cursed. Verse 24. Etadakyahi me brahman sunitatmaja chestitam shraddhadhanaya bhaktaya tvam pravaro vittamaha. Vidur requested Maitreya, "My dear Brahman, you are well conversant with all subjects, both past and future. Therefore, I wish to hear from you all the activities of King Vena. I am your faithful devotee, so please explain this." So Maitreya was describing the dynasty of Dhruva Maharaj in a summary manner to arrive to the Prachetas, which was the initial question by Vidur. Now Vidur, he basically asks him to stop at the point of King Vena and speak a little bit more about why he was cursed by the Brahmanas. So we have noticed in the conversation that this point comes up again and again, that Vidur will glorify the speaker and will also establish his claim to being an audience. So he says that, why am I asking you this question? Because you're conversant with all subjects, both past and future. How is it that Maitreya is conversant with future? Because he's conversant with the scriptures. And the scriptures talk about the past and the future. Just like in the Bhagavatam, we see that the past is described as well as the future is described. So that's why he says you're conversant with past and future. And then Vidur says that I'm your faithful devotee, because he has been submissively hearing Maitreya for so long, because he has been placing questions with a lot of humility and faith. So primary qualities of a devotee. What is the nature of service that Vidur is doing in front of Maitreya? Shravan. Right. So he is doing Shravan Seva. He's listening to what Maitreya is saying. He's putting forward questions in a submissive manner, and he's listening with faith. So Prabhupada notes that this process of submissive inquiry and explanation between disciple and spiritual master is the process of making spiritual advancements. Verse 25, Maitre vacha angoshma medam rajrishi ajhar mahakritam najagmur devatas tasmin ahuta brahmavadibhi. Sri Maitreya replied, "My dear Vidur, once the great King Anga arranged to perform the great sacrifice known as Ashwamedha. All the expert Brahmanas present knew how to invite the demigods, but in spite of their efforts, no demigods participated or appeared in the sacrifice." So from this verse 25, for the next 15 verses, Maitreya is describing the events that will lead to the birth of King Vena. Srila Prabhupada comments that in order to perform sacrifices, there needs to be qualified brahmanas and adequate paraphernalia. So the qualified brahmanas need to be there to chant the appropriate mantras and to know the right process. And the paraphernalia needs to be there according to the injunctions. The paraphernalia tends to be elaborate. We know the case when Yudhishthira wanted to do the Rajasuya Yagya. Then he needed so much of gold that Arjun went looking for gold, and then finally in the Himalayas he found the gold of King Mandata, and then he got it back, and then he was able to perform the sacrifice. So very elaborate sacrifice paraphernalia needs to be consolidated. When Rishi Shringa was invited by Dashrath to perform the Putrakameshi Yagya. Then Rishi Shringa said that you get all the paraphernalia. And how long did it take Dashrath to get the paraphernalia? 1 year. So he was the emperor of the world with so much of facility. It took him 1 year to get all the requisite paraphernalia. So Prabhupada says these days, both are lacking. There are no qualified brahmanas and the paraphernalia is also missing. And Prabhupada also says that the animal sacrifices in these yagyas were in fact to test the efficacy of the mantras. Because when the animals were sacrificed, they were rejuvenated. So this is a point Prabhupada makes fairly regularly throughout his purports to disambiguate the notion that meat eating was a part of Vedic tradition. That the animals were sacrificed and eaten. So he says the animals were not sacrificed to be eaten, but to test that the yagya, just like one of the earlier tests in the yagyas was that the brahmanas were supposed to light the fire of the yagyas by mantras. They were not supposed to use a match or anything else. So by that, the potency of the mantras and the knowledge of the brahmanas was verified. And when the yagya was completed and animals were sacrificed, and if they were rejuvenated, then it indicated that the yagya was successful. And in this case, the devas did not appear to accept their oblations. So the oblations are offered through the fire, and through the fire, they carried to the various devas, and the brahmanas are able to see the oblations being taken to the respective devas. So they would chant the mantras, saying the name of the demigod. They would say Indraya Swaha, and that oblation would go to Indra, or Vayu Swaha would go to Vayudev. But the brahmanas now could see that the oblations were not being accepted. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada also says that, that because all this is not possible, the only practical yagya in this current day is Sankirtan yagya, or the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra 24 hours a day. So that's the yagya for our current age. Verse 26. Tammuchur veshmatastatra Yajamana mathartvija Chavimshihu manani Nate granati devataha. The priest engaged in the sacrifice, then informed King Anga, "O king, we are properly offering the clarified butter in the sacrifice. But despite all our efforts, the demigods do not accept it." So the brahmanas, by the Brahma Tejas, they could see it. The king was, of course, sitting along with them, but he could not. But the brahmanas, they were qualified brahmanas, and they could see that although they were offering the ghee in the oblations, with the oblations in the fire, with all the necessary mantras, but they could see that the devas were not accepting it. Next verse. Rajan havim shayadoshtani Shraddhaya siddhanitae Chandamsyaya tayamani Yojitani dhritvritaha. O king, we know that the paraphernalia to perform the sacrifice is well collected by you with great faith and care, and is not polluted. Our chanting of the Vedic hymns is also not deficient in any way. For all the brahmanas and priests present here are expert and are executing the performances properly. So the Brahmanas and the priest, they're outlining 4 possible reasons that the yajna may have been, or a yajna could be unsuccessful. First is the faith of the performer. Second is the purity of the paraphernalia. The third is the chanting of the Vedic hymns. And the fourth is the proper performance of the rituals. So they say all these 4 things have been done correctly. That you with good faith have collected paraphernalia that is pure. We have chanted the mantras correctly, and we have executed the yajna as per the injunctions. Despite that, the yajna is not successful. In the Bhagavad Gita, 17th chapter, Krishna says that any sacrifice performed without regard for the direction of the scriptures, without distribution of prasadam, without chanting of Vedic hymns and remunerations to the priest, and without faith, is considered to be in the mode of ignorance. Prabhupada says that the Brahmanas were conversant with the signs to pronounce a Vedic mantra in the right accent. And the combination of the mantra and Sanskrit words must be chanted with the right pronunciation, otherwise it will be not successful. So it's not just a matter of reciting the Vedic hymns, but because they are sound incantations, the potency is in the sound that is created. So the sound is not just the alphabet, but it is also the accent. That what is the rhythm that with which it is chanted. And if that is wrong, then the Vedas will become, the mantras will become nishfal, or sometimes they will give the opposite result. Right? We see the example of who's the father of Vritasur, who performed the yajna to kill Indra? Twastha. So we see the case, thank you Prabhu, we see the case of Twastha, right? That very, very qualified priest, very powerful Brahmana. And he did the yajna, and he wanted to create a personality who kills Indra. But there is a slight fault in his chanting of the mantra. And instead of Indraha, he says Indraha. Instead of killer of Indra, it is killed by Indra. So Vritasura appears, but he is killed by Indra. Srila Prabhupada says that, but by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, one can attain the highest benefit of sacrificial performances. Even if the Hare Krishna mantra is not chanted properly, it still has so much potency that the chanter gains effect. Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shakti Trapita Niyamate Smaranya Nakala Itadrashita Krupa Bhagwan Mamapi Devya Midrasham Yahajini Nanuga. So why is the exception made for the Hare Krishna mantra? That Tav Krupa. Because Krishna has given that concession. We try to chant properly, we try to chant attentively, but even if we don't, then because of the mercy of Krishna, we get the benefit. Verse 28. Na vidame hadevana helanam vayamanvapi yanna grananti bhagan swa ye deva karma sakshinaha. Dear king, we do not find any reason that the demigod should feel insulted or neglected in any way. But still, the demigods who are witnesses for the sacrifice do not accept the shares. We do not know why this is so. So, the priests are saying that if the worship was faulty, if any of those four things were missing, the faith of the performer, the purity of the paraphernalia, the accuracy of the process, the proper incantation of the mantras, if any of these four were faulty, then we could understand that the devas will not accept. Now, important point to note here also is that the priests are not, they're talking about faith, but not about love. So when the person performed the yajna to the devas, it's almost like a transaction. Like you're going in an exam, if you answer all the questions correctly, then they will force to give you admission. So when you're performing the yajnas, whether you do it out of affection with the devas, whether you're using them for your own desires, devas are forced to give you the results. We see that in case these prominent personalities like Ravan and Hiranyakashipu, Brahma knew that they were rascals. But because they had performed all the process, it became their due to receive benediction. Brahma could not refuse to give them benediction. So there is no love. There was no love between Hiranyakashipu and Brahma. But the process forced Brahma to give benediction. But on the other hand, when there is love, even if the process is faulty, all that is overlooked. The famous example is that of, later on we'll see, the Prachetas. That Lord Shiva is personally so pleased by the Prachetas just because of their good character, their sense of cooperation with one another, that they did not even worship Lord Shiva, but Lord Shiva, he sings the Rudra Gita, gives them the mantra to please Krishna, all the greatest benediction. He gives all on his own. They didn't. The Prachetas had not performed any yajna, had not given any praise to Lord Shiva, but just there was affection. Same thing with Markandeya Rishi. We see that Lord Shiva is going and sees Markandeya performing austerities, and Parvati becomes very compassionate towards him. That he's been performing austerities so sincerely. Go and give him a benediction. And Lord Shiva says, personalities like Markandeya, they don't need any benedictions. They are just fixed in their worship of Lord. Say, no, go, give him some benediction. And then Lord Shiva, he goes down and enters into the meditation of Markandeya, brings him out, and then gives him benediction. So when love is there, then these rules and regulations don't apply that much. So Srila Prabhupada says that in devotional service, there are offenses known as seva aparadha. Those who are engaged in worshipping the deity, Radha and Krishna in the temple, should avoid such offenses. These offenses in services are described in the Nectar of Devotion. If you simply make a show of offering service to the deities, but do not care for seva aparadha, certainly the Radha Krishna deity will not accept the offerings from such non-devotees. Devotees engaged in temple worship should therefore not manufacture their own methods, but strictly follow the regulative principles of cleanliness, and then offerings will be accepted. It's kind of interesting, Prabhupada. He brings it down to cleanliness. In his letters, And in his instructions, Prabhupada was stressed on punctuality and cleanliness. He did not stress so much on that you should know all the mantras and you should be able to recite them accurately. You should know how to perform yagyas. But he stressed on what seemed to be rather mundane things, punctuality and cleanliness. But essentially, they are symptoms of commitment to the Lord. If you're committing to the Lord a certain seva, then not following it is seva aparadha. And of course, it's said that unintentional seva aparadha can also happen. And it can be negated by jap. While chanting, nama aparadha can happen. And it can be negated by Vaishnava seva. But Vaishnava aparadha, no recourse, nothing to negate it. Next verse, 29. Maitre vacha angudvija vachaha shutva yajmana sudurmanaha tat prastum yasrajadvacham sadasyam tat anujnaya. Maitreya explained that King Anga, after hearing the statements of the priest, was greatly aggrieved. At that time, he took permission from the priests to break his silence and inquired from all the priests who were present in the sacrificial arena. So one of the requirements when performing yagyas is that one should follow the vow of silence, Maun Vrata. And that way, the attention of the person is fully focused on the performance of the yagya. Because at least these kinds of concurrent yagyas are typically performed by grasthas, and the grasthas tend to have a lot of responsibility. So they're sometimes making arrangements for the guests, sometimes for the paraphernalia, or sometimes they get busy in their affairs. So the yagya keeps getting interrupted. So we see that even now, that when the yagyas are being done, the jajman or the benefactor of the yagya, now I don't hear them saying take Mauna Vrat, but basically they say that please don't get up. Just sit over here. This is your asana. Only get up after the yagya is finished. Otherwise, the people keep getting up, running out here and there. So the flow of the yagya is disturbed. Now, of course, people, even if they're sitting, they take out their cell phone and are busy on the cell phones. But the yagyas now are, they're notional yagyas, because as Prabhupada many times says, no qualified priests, not enough paraphernalia purity, and the environment is not conducive. Even then, Srila Prabhupada himself did yagyas. He did the initiation yagyas, Vivah yagya, Sthapan yagya. But he would say they're more to create a sense of formality. When you do a yagya, you're formally marking a certain incident. Now you're initiated. Now you're married. So it was more for that purpose. Okay, next verse. Nagachanda huta deva nagrananti grahaniha sadassa patayo bruta kim avadyam maya kratam. King Anga addressed the priestly order. My dear priests, kindly tell me what offense I have committed. Although invited, the demigods are neither taking part in the sacrifice nor accepting their shares. So the priest had previously talked about 4 things that was not a problem. So the king, after taking permission to break his vow of silence, now he asked them that maybe I had faith, maybe the paraphernalia was pure, maybe the process was followed, and maybe the mantras were chanted. But if the demigods are still not accepting it, there is something else that has happened. So because the priests could not be held responsible for it, King Anga rightly summarizes that it is a fault on my end. Now, earlier on, the priest had said that we do not know why the devas are not accepting the oblations. And the king is still asking them because he's encouraging them to speak about things that they would be hesitant to speak about. So they're hesitant to speak about the shortcomings of the king, which is etiquette. That not only is he the king, he is the benefactor of the yajna, called the jajman. And the brahmanas by nature are very, very diplomatic. So they do not want to speak things that will hurt the king. So the king understands that. So now he's explicitly asking them that, tell me what offense that I have committed. So now the brahmanas will tell him about the offense. Okay. So we'll do this verse and then we'll pause and see if there's discussion. Sadasaspartaya uchu Nardeva bhavato na agham tavan manaksthitam astya ekam prakritanannagam yad ihedrak tvam aprajaha. The head priest said, O king, in this life, we do not find any sinful activity, even with your mind. So you're not in the least offensive. But we can see that in your previous life, you performed sinful activities, due to which, in spite of you having all qualifications, you have no son. So this reflects the potency of the priests, that they're able to see that the king's current life is sinless. And because this is Satyug, even sinful thoughts in the mind are considered to be sins. So in the Satyug, it is, any piety that you do, you have to actually perform it for it to be considered to be pious. But even if you think of a sinful activity, it is sinful. We see the case in Parshuram. Parshuram's pastime, his mother, Renuka, when she was going to collect some paraphernalia, then she saw Chitrangad, the Gandharva, taking bath. And he was extremely handsome. So in her mind, she got attracted to him, or very momentarily attracted. And then she shook it away. She took the paraphernalia, went back. And then Jamadagni, by his mystic powers, he could understand that she had committed adultery. So that's why he ordered his sons to kill their mother. And then, of course, the pastime follows that. They all refuse and Parshuram kills them. So Satyug, it's like that. In the Kali Yuga, it is opposite. That if you think of pious activities, it is counted as pious credit. But there is no sin in thinking sinful activities. Only when you execute upon them, they get accrued as sin. So the sages here are saying that in this life, you did not commit any sins, either explicitly or mentally. But now they are saying that in your previous life, you had committed some sins. They don't explain which sins, but some sins because of which you do not have a son. And they address King Anga as Nardeva. So they're saying that Nardeva means that you're the demigods amongst humans. So you represent the devas among the human beings. So things like not having any progeny or not having a son is considered to be a sign of impious activities in the previous life. We see that in the case of Dashrath in Mahabharata. We see that in the case of Sagar in Ramayana. In both cases, the devas refused to accept their offerings because they did not have a son. And they later on rectified it by the performance of either yagya. So Dashrath rectified it by the performance of Putrakamesha yagya. Sagar rectified it by performance of austerities, and then they had a son. So Prabhupada says that the purpose of marrying is to beget a son, because a son is necessary to deliver his fathers and forefathers. But then Prabhupada said the son has to be a qualified son. He quotes Chanakya Pandit, who says, Putrahinam graham shunyam, that without a son, married life is simply abominable. But then Chanakya Pandit also says that a son who is not qualified to deliver the father is like urine. So the son has to be a qualified son. Okay, so I'll pause here and see who has questions or comments.
Just a clarification too, on the yajna side. So yajna we can understand. So even the marriages today, right? It is a form of yajna what we do, and as it is not done properly, is that the reason for whatever is going on in Kali Yuga? Not proper marriages, or?
So I'm going to give my opinion. I don't know of any statements, or I can't recollect of any statements by Prabhupada that the problems in the marriages are just a reflection of the nature of the consciousness of the people. Because everywhere the yagyas that are being done, they are mostly symbolic yagyas, whether it's initiation yagya. Prabhupada would say that the initiation yagya is just to create a sense of formality. But when a person begins to follow the instructions of the guru, then he becomes a disciple. The yagya is just a formality, just like marriage, the yagya is there. So these are called samskars. They create impressions. So you get married and there is a priest, and then you, at least in the Indian system, for 2 or 3 days, the ceremonies goes on. So it creates a strong impression in your mind that formalizes the relationship. Right? But I do not believe that it either creates any potency or contaminates anything within the marriage, right? Because either way, the yagyas don't have that ability.
I tend to agree with you. Thank you.
Just a comment in the yajna we do. It's mostly Guru Parampara prayers and Harinam. The one that is come there, it has been simplified into chanting all the Guru Parampara prayers, and then finished by by Krishna's name. No?
Prabhu, your voice was breaking up, but I think I understand what you're saying, that the performance of the yagyas are purified by the chanting of Krishna's name. Is that what you're saying?
No, yeah. No, what I'm saying is in ISKCON, can you hear me now? Yeah, in ISKCON Yagna that we do, what we do is mostly chanting of the Guru Parampara prayers, and then chanting of the holy name.
That is correct. So, well, yeah, we chant the parampara. Srila Prabhupada would often chant the Brahma Samhita in the performance of the yagyas. Nowadays, I see the priests, they're becoming more traditional in the sense that they typically chant the Purusha Shukta. So, recommended is the 16 verses of Purusha Shukta to be chanted. So with every verse you have a swaha with that. So now I see priests are becoming more traditional in that way. That they're being more trained, like they're training centers for the priests. So they're being trained in the performance of that. Regardless of that, there's a preponderance of the chanting of the holy name. So whether they chant the Brahma Samhita or the Purusha Shukta, or they chant the Guru Parampara, it's a small part. The major part of it is the Sankirtan. That's what is the purifying aspect of the yagyas in the current day. When the Krishna Balram temple was being inaugurated in Vrindavan, then so there was a lot of internal politics in Vrindavan. There was the Brahman lobby and priests and Goswamis, etc. And Prabhupada did not want the temple to be mired in any kind of controversy or resentment. So actually the deity installation was not done by Prabhupada. It was done by the local priests from Vrindavan. They came and Prabhupada invited them, they did the deity installation. And Prabhupada was sitting with the disciples. You know, there's a courtyard in front of the deities. He was sitting in the courtyard over there. And the priests were chanting all this Vedic mantras. They were arguing with one another that now you should chant this and now you should do this paraphernalia. And Prabhupada was laughing and he was saying that, so Prabhupada was sitting and doing Hare Krishna Kirtan with his disciples. And Prabhupada was laughing and he was saying, this is where the real yagya is going on. So the Sankirtan yagya is the real yagya for this age. We still do the other yagyas, but they are more for samskars, just to create an impression, that a favorable impression, more for that reason.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, carrying on, verse 32. Tatha sadhya bhadram te atmanam suprajam nripa ishitaste putra kamasya putram dasyati yagyabhuk. O king, we wish all good fortune for you. You have no son, but if you pray at once to the Supreme Lord and ask for a son, and you execute the sacrifice for that purpose, the enjoyer of the sacrifice, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, will fulfill your desire. So after the Brahmanas have found the defect, they're also recommending how it can be rectified. So this is a typical example of Karmakandi Yagya, that you pray to the Supreme Lord, but you pray for a material desire. And if the prayer is properly executed, then the Lord will fulfill the desires. So the priests are recommending King Anga to perform a sacrifice to please the Lord to achieve a son. Verse 33. Tatha svabhagadeyani grahishyanti divaukshaha yadyagya purusha saksha apatyaya hariritaha. When Hari, the supreme enjoyer of all sacrifices, is invited to fulfill your desire for a son, all the demigods will come with him and take their shares in the sacrifice. So Prabhupada says that whenever a sacrifice is performed, it is meant for satisfying Lord Vishnu, the enjoyer of the fruits of all sacrifices. When Lord Vishnu agrees to come to a sacrificial arena, all the demigods naturally follow the master, and their shares are offered in such sacrifice. The conclusion is that the sacrifices performed are meant for Lord Vishnu, not for demigods. Even the Concurrent sacrifices, they are meant for Lord Vishnu. So this also means that once the fault of not having a son will be rectified, the devas will accept their share of the offering. So once that sin, whatever that sin King Anga performed in his previous life is eradicated, the devas will accept their share of offerings. Verse 34. Tam stan kamam harir dadyan yan kamyate janaha aradito yate vaisha tatha pumsham falodaya. The performer of the sacrifices under Concurrent activities achieves the fulfillment of the desire for which he worships the Lord. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada stresses that while the Lord will reciprocate with the desire of the worshipper, the devotees are not interested in such kind of sacrifices because they are transactional, concurrent. That I will do something for you, you do something for me. Even though it's bona fide, it's authorized, it's in the Vedas, and the Lord does reciprocate, it does not please the Lord. The Lord reciprocates out of a sense of duty. So Prabhupada says the significant word in this verse is kama, which means sense gratificatory desire. And a devotee should be devoid of all kama. He is anyabilashita shunya. Should not have, no. So the only desire a devotee should have is to please the Lord. That's the difference between a karmi and a devotee. Iti vyavasita vipras tasya ragnaha prajataye Gurudasam nirvapam shipi vishtaya vishnave. Thus, for the sake of a son for King Anga, they decided to offer oblations to Lord Vishnu, who is situated in the heart of all living entities. So we see once again in this purport, Srila Prabhupada stresses that sacrifice of animals in Yajna does not mean that they are being killed. Prabhupada makes this point, as I said, over and over again. So he also says that Shipi Vishtaya appears in this verse. Shipi means the flames of the sacrifices. In the sacrificial fire, if the oblations are offered into the flames, then Lord Vishnu is situated there in the form of the flames. Therefore, Lord Vishnu is known as Shipi Vishtha. So Vishtha means Avishta, or comes from Avishta, which means situated, and Shipi is the flames. So in more formal yajnas, you will see that once the yajna flame has been ignited, then the priest will go through this process of invoking the Lord in the flames. So by different mudras, by mantras, they will invite the Lord to be present in the flames. And after they have been done, then they will actually worship the Lord. They will perform a complete arti of the fire in the yagya, understanding that Lord Vishnu is now present over there as Shipi Vishta. 36. Tasmat Purusha Uthastau Hemamalya Amalambraha Hiranmayena Patrena Siddhamadaya Payasam. As soon as the oblation was offered in the fire, a person appeared from the fire altar wearing a golden garland and a white dress. He was carrying a golden pot filled with rice boiled in milk. So this is payasam. Payasam is kheer. So once again, because the priests were qualified and they were expert in chanting the mantras, and the king had faith. So when they chanted the appropriate mantras, then Lord Vishnu reciprocated, and this personality appeared carrying a pot filled with payasam. 37. Savipranumato raja grihitvanjalinadunam avgrayamudayuktaha pradat patnya udaradi. The king was very liberal, and after taking permission from the priests, he took the preparation in his joint palms, and after smelling it, he offered a portion to his wife. So Prabhupada explains that what Maitreya is indicating over here, that while the king was very qualified, the wife was not. So his wife Sunita was the daughter of Mrityu, and she had inherited a tamasic nature from her father. The Mrityu is the demigod of death. So Yamraj is sometimes called the demigod of death, but he's just the one who gives punishment. He's more the judge. But Mrityu is the demigod of death. And in the creation of material creation, it is mentioned that Mrityu appears from the evacuation hole of Brahma. It says that all inauspicious things like Mrityu, the demigod of death, appears from the evacuation hole of Brahma. So it's considered to be tamasic. Again, it's not clear why King Anga married Sunita, but he did. And she had the nature of her father. So one may also wonder that why would the Lord punish King Anga? Because this son who is going to be born is going to be a cause of excessive misery for him. Srila Prabhupada explains that sometimes the Lord creates unfavorable conditions to increase the detachment of his devotees and accelerate their spiritual journey. Like the pinching of the father. Sometimes the father pinches the child so that the child can get up and eat. So the child might complain, why did you pinch me? It's hurting me so much. The father says, no, you'll be hungry. Please eat something for the benefit of the child. In the purport, Prabhupada says that since the king was very liberal, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in order to increase his detachment from this material world, will that a cruel son be born of the queen, so that the king would have to leave home. As stated above, Lord Vishnu fills the desires of the karmis as they desire, but the Lord fulfills the desires of the devotees in a different way. Right? Sometimes it is said that the Lord fulfills the wants of the non-devotees and the needs of the devotees. And there's a difference between the two. So a non-devotee may want more money. Lord will say, okay, you're worshipping me, you get more money. Now that money may cause them anxiety, or it may cause them to have many enemies, but the Lord still gives them money. That's what they want. For a devotee, he looks at what the devotee needs. So the devotee may be asking for something, but the Lord will give something that will actually fulfill the need of the devotee. And the needs of devotees are to detach from the material world and absorb in spiritual life. So that is why the Lord will somehow or the other creates conditions, sometimes apparently favorable, sometimes apparently unfavorable, but in all cases auspicious. Right? We see the case in Arjuna, that Krishna created a condition that was unfavorable to Arjuna. Him becoming under delusion and unwilling to fight. But then the Lord delivered the Bhagavad Gita and fulfilled his basic desires, which is to further develop a loving relationship. Prabhupada says this is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upyantite. It's one of the Chatushloki, 10:10. The Lord gives the devotee the opportunity to make progress further and further, so he may return back home, back to Godhead. Okay, verse 38. Satatpum svanam rajni prasyavai patiyuradade garbham kala upavrate kumaram shushuve praja. Although the queen had no son, after eating that food, which had the power to produce a male child, she became pregnant by her husband. And in due course of time, she gave birth to a son. So Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that among the 10 kinds of purificatory processes, one is Pumshavanam, in which the wife is offered some prasad or remnants of foodstuff offered to Lord Vishnu, so that after sexual intercourse with her husband, she may conceive a child. So these 10 purificatory processes that Srila Prabhupada is referring to, they are known as 10 Vidhi Samskars, or 10 Karmas, or 10 purificatory process. And the 10 purificatory processes are Vivah, marriage, Garbhadan, conceiving, which is what is described here. Then Sivantoyanayan, in which the husband parts the wife's hair and then puts kumkum over there. Then Jata or Medha, which is for the intelligence of the sign, a child, it is also the birth samskar when the child takes birth. Then Namkaran, which is name giving. Anaprashan, which is the eating of grains. Then Chud Karanam, this is the Mundan ceremony, the first haircut. Then Vidyarambha, this is the studying. Upanayanam, this is the shelter of the Guru. And then Antayeshti Kriya, this is the death. Now, this list is by no means, so there are different lists of the the 10 karmas. Right, this is the list that is given in the ISKCON approved publication, the Samskars book. In other equally respectable followed, there are slightly different lists. Some of them actually have 16. They also have the Pumshavan, which is the samskar for obtaining a male child, then Shoshani Homa, just before the birth of the child, then Nishkarmana, the first outgoing, then Karnaveda, ear piercing, and there are some other lists also. But sacrifices like rituals like this, even though the devotees are a main focus is worshipping Krishna, but still recommended to follow samskars. Just like the devotees are recommended to follow Varnashram. The difference is that Varnashram is Devi Varnashram. They follow Varnashram to please the Supreme Lord. So they perform these sacrifices, these samskars to please the Lord. So like in the Annaprashan, I'm sure you must have attended Annaprashan of the child. One of the things is that the child is made to touch something. Now, traditionally, the child is made to touch gold or books, or depending on which caste the child is from. They may put like weapons if it's a Kshatriya, they may put pen if it is a Brahman. So basically just to indicate that the child will become a great warrior or a great scholar or a great merchant. Similar samskars are done in Vaishnava tradition also, but the child is asked to touch the Bhagavatam, or if there is gold, then it's understood that if he touches gold, then he will become a book distributor, raise a lot of money for the service of the Lord. Right? So these are examples where externally they may seem like rituals, but they're internally the mode is different. How they can be used in the service of the Lord. Okay, I'll do a couple of more verses and then we'll stop and see if there's discussion. Verse 39. Sabala eva purusho mata maha manovritaha adharmamaso dabhavam mrityum tena bhavad adharmikaha. The boy was born partially in the dynasty of irreligion. His grandfather was death personified, and the boy grew up as his follower. He became a greatly irreligious person. So due to the faults on his mother's side, Vena grew up to be very irreligious. However, because he was born from the sacrifice of Vishnu, which was the caused by his father's detachment, he eventually became beneficial to everyone. How? Because his body was used to create Prithu Maharaj, who is the incarnation of the Lord himself. So no activity that is done to please the Lord will be unfruitful. The fruits may manifest in different ways, but they will manifest. So one may wonder that why was King Anga put in this unfortunate situation? So we discussed this, that it was because, so King Anga had two unfortunate things going on, that his wife belonged to the dynasty of death personified. And his son took after his grandfather. Now, ultimately, we will see that this was the mercy of the Lord to increase the devotion in Anga. Srila Prabhupada also explains an interesting thing in the purport, that the son takes the qualities of the mother and the daughter takes the qualities of the father. So Sunita was the daughter of Mrityu. So being a daughter, she took the quality of her father. And Venu was the son of Sunita. So being the son, he took the quality of the mother. So that's how he inherited the qualities of Mrityu and became inauspicious. So Naranam Matula Karma means that the child generally follows the qualities of the maternal family. If the maternal family is very corrupt or sinful, the child, even though born of a good father, becomes the victim of the maternal family. According to Vedic civilization, before marriage takes place, an account is taken of both the boys and the girl's family. If according to astrological calculation, the combination is perfect, then marriage takes place. Sometimes, however, there is a mistake and family life becomes frustrating. Okay, we'll do one more verse. Sasarasanam udyamya mrigayurvanagocharaha antyasadur mrigandina veno savityarojanaha. After fixing his bow and arrow, the cruel boy would go to the forest and unnecessarily kill innocent deer. As soon as he came, all the people would cry, "Here comes cruel Vena, here comes cruel Vena." So in 10 verses, we will see the reasons why Anga leaves home. So this verse is talking about the cruelty of the boy Vena. Even as a boy, he was very cruel. Now one might say that the Kshatriyas are supposed to hunt. That's how they develop their skills with bow and arrow. That's how they develop their skills of tracking, hunting, etc. So Prabhupada says that is true. The Kshatriyas are allowed to hunt so that they can use that same skill to fight with their opponents, to punish the criminals. But King Vena is described as unnecessarily killing the animals, which means that he wasn't just killing them to sharpen his skills, but he was simply killing for the pleasure of killing. So even in the jungle, there is a law of the jungle that the animal will only kill for their own need. Sometimes we'll see that there are lakes and the deer and the lion are side by side drinking water. Because the lion has eaten, the deer sense that the lion has eaten, so the lion is no more a threat to the deer. The lion is not going to just kill the deer for the fun of it. So similarly, the Kshatriyas, they would only do as much as is needed in order to sharpen the skills. But Vena was so cruel that people around him would recognize that cruelty, and they said, "Here comes cruel Vena, here comes cruel Vena." So he was, Prabhupada says, from the beginning of his life, he was fearful to the citizens. Okay. So I'll pause over here. And somebody has any comments? for discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Regarding Anga's wife, Sunita, right? She is the daughter of Mrityu, and she has a tamasic nature. Is it like is there any depiction or a description that she is evil, or she is because born of the Mrityu, she is of that nature, or and the reason why I'm asking that question is just because King Vena was born of Mrityu, sorry, not Mrityu, Sunita is bad. Is that what the reason what Maitra Rishi is telling to Vidura?
That's correct. Because he was born of Sunita, he inherited her nature also. And because she was born of Mrityu, she inherited his nature. So through the generations that evil nature was passed down. There's no description of specific activities by Sunita that indicates that she was doing sinful activities or for that matter, pious activities. But it's just mentioned that she had this nature. In a strict sense, Mrityu is also doing his duty. Right? His duty is to be the cause of death. People die because of their own destiny, but Mrityu happens to be the demigod who executes this on behalf of the laws of nature. But because that activity is so tamasic, it's like the example that is given is that the people who are working in slaughterhouses, they're slaughtering the animals there because it's their job. They're getting paid to do it. They don't have any personal animosity towards those animals. But because the whole environment is so contaminated, then they acquire that nature. I was reading an article where they were saying that the cases of perverse psychology or psychological breakdown amongst people who are workers in these slaughterhouses is very, very high. And it's a job that rotates many people. People cannot stand for a long time. Right? So it's the whole environment that is so contaminated. So for that nature, Mrityu has that nature. He acquires it because of the duty that he does. And that is basically transitioning down to his daughter and his grandson. So yeah, you're right. It's just because of the lineage, King Vena has this tamasic nature.
Krishna Prabhu, just a comment. Normally, especially in Indian family, everybody wants to have a son to continue the lineage. And now we understood that the son get the quality of the mother's side. That means the lineage is changed. In a way, it's a bit controversial because now the lineage would be from the quality of the mother's side, not from the family itself. You understood what I'm trying to say?
Sorry, Prabhu, did not follow.
No, what I'm trying to say is normally in the Indian tradition, everybody wants to have a son to continue the lineage of the family. Now we understood that the son inherit the qualities of the mother's side. Now, actually, it's not the lineage of this family that is continuing, it's the mother's side lineage.
Oh,
He really get the characteristic of the mother.
yeah. Yeah, that is true. So it's ironical that everybody wants the son, but the son is actually carrying the tradition of the mother, not the father. But I guess Vedically, being a male, not just the characteristics, but being a male qualifies one to carry on the tradition. So in the Vedas, it is largely coming because so this is mostly in Karma Kanda, of course, that only the males can perform yajnas. So as the child grows, the child at different points of time performs different yajnas for the pitras, for the purification of the parents, for the family. If it's a girl, she cannot perform those yajnas. She can only sit in the yajnas along with her husband, who belongs to a different family. So that was the original reason why there was so much of importance for a male, so that the tradition of performing this benefactory yajnas continued. Later on, it became something else. So now there are no yajnas performed, right? So there are no. So one is as good as another, right? Neither the boy nor the girl will perform any yajnas. So they are the same, but that conception has just stayed. The importance of having a son.
Yeah, because having a daughter, sometimes they want to know the sex of the baby that will be born, whether a son or a daughter. If she's a daughter, then oh my goodness, this is bad. I'm not talking anything, but in certain family, they don't like daughters.
That is true.
And Prabhuji, like adding to the point of Sarang Prabhuji, like the child may inherit naturally some qualities from the in-laws parents, but in the Vedic tradition, the child is born at father's family, and and the frequent union with the mother's side is relatively less, because it's combined families, like father's brother, like that. The whole setup is there. The child inculcate the traits of a father's side of culture to take it forward, the yajnas and the required prescribed duties.
Yes, Prabhu, that is correct.
Just felt like because he may carry the affection towards the mother's family and all, but day to day his activities will largely depend on the environment he's grown up in.
Right. So there is an inherited nature and an acquired nature, and we are typically a combination of these two things. So there's a nature that which we are born with. There is certain swabhav that we are born with, and then there is a further nature that we acquire based on our environment.
Yeah.
So in these verses, Srila Prabhupada is mostly talking about the inherited nature. So King Anga's environment was very sattvic, because he's being glorified as a pious king. But his inherited nature was tamasic, and it obviously, in this case, it basically surpassed anything that he could acquire from all the association that he was getting, the environment that he was going in. His inherited nature was very strongly tamasic.
Yeah. And Prabhuji, earlier you are mentioning the son will carry the traits of mother and the daughter will carry the traits of father. But in either case, their inherit the mother's side traits more, Prabhuji, be it boy or girl? Because some people will have both only girls. They also carry the inherited nature of from the mother's side, Prabhuji?
No, Srila Prabhupada says that the daughter tends to carry the nature of the father, and the son tends to carry the nature of the mother.
Okay, yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll pause here. Thank you so much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sai Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hari Bol, Hari